Yesterday, I was a little bit perturbed about the Hellfire Gala sequel announcement. And I got to be honest, it wasn't only that was frustrating me with X-Men comics. It pisses me off to no end that literally anyone that doesn't really like X-Men or know anything about X-Men, those are the people that Marvel Comics would prefer to write X-Men comics under Jordan White and his terrible leadership. Look no further than the recent interview from Adventures in Poor Taste with Nadia Shammas. A lot of you are saying, who's Nadia Shammas? Maybe you've heard that name recently. Marvel and DC are absolutely trying to make Nadia Shammas a really big deal. I do believe it's likely because she's Palestinian American. Although, interestingly enough, just recently she had to go out there and explain to people that she wasn't actually Muslim. She was actually a Christian that was from Palestine. Apparently, people in the X-Men office, or maybe at Marvel and DC, didn't realize that, or maybe the people that were championing her on. If you go to her social media, which is horrendous, do not do it. But if you dare go, she is one of the most fervent anti-Semites you will see in the entire comic book industry. She has some really, really nasty things to say. She does not like Jews at all, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you think about the Marvel leadership and, you know, people at Disney. There are actually a lot of Jewish folks within the executives and whatnot. Yet, someone like Nadia Shammas can get away with these things. You or I, if we did this in our work, you know what happens. If you say the stuff that she said on her Twitter, boom, you get fired because you're a hateful person. If you're Nadia Shammas, you get a fucking opportunity you didn't ask for. And what I'm meaning by that is you are not going to believe some of the information that she let out during her interview with Adventures in Poor Taste. Like, this is ridiculous stuff. Not only is she not really an X-Men fan, and you can tell that from some of the answers, how she got the gig is absolutely ridiculous. And who she thinks, the creator that she's worked with recently, or is about to work with, it's about to be published, is a legendary comic creator. That's the last thing I'm going to cover. You're going to want to stick around for that one because we're going to have a nice laugh together. The fact that the person that she thinks is a legend in comic books is, I don't want to give it away. Now let's get into this interview. There's 4 question and answers that I'm going to cover. It's longer than that. There is a link in the video description if you would like to read the entire interview yourself. Now let's get to the first question. When X-Force Annual number 1 was first announced, you mentioned X-Men have been a part of your life since you were 6 years old. What can you share about your history with the X-Men as a fan? I was a big fan of X-Men the animated series as a kid, as well as the original film trilogy. I still remember watching The Last Stand in theaters, and then also later going to a Blockbuster video that was playing it in store and pretending to browse just so I could watch it again. It's funny that the X-Men have been with me way before I even started reading comics. Only Jordan White and the Legion of Doofuses could go out there and hire someone to read an X-Men comic. When you talk to them and you say, what's your favorite memory of X-Men? And they say, it's X3 The Last Stand. One of the worst fucking superhero movies ever created. I say it's worse than Wolverine Origins because Wolverine Origins has a couple of redeeming qualities about it outside of just having Hugh Jackman as Wolverine in the movie. There are a couple of things that actually work in that one. Nothing whatsoever works in X3 The Last Stand. That thing was absolute trash. Not shocking that Nadia Shammas, the next superstar in comic books and your next X-Men writer, would have looked to that for their source material. This is a professional comic book writer. They were asked a very simple question. What is your history with the X-Men? Can you share that with us? And they went right to The Last Stand. Not the actual source material, the comic book that inspired that movie. That's actually really good, The Dark Phoenix. Not the Fall of the Mutants, nothing like that. No comic book would have actually inspired this comic book writer to want to write X-Men. It would be The Last Stand. And of course, X-Men the animated series, which everyone loves. In fact, the only comic book I even remember her mentioning in the interview is Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino's Old Man Logan. And she was like, well, I hope you don't make fun of me, but I like their Old Man Logan. It's like, yeah, no one liked Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino on a fucking Wolverine comic. Like, real hard choice there. Way to dig in and really pull out some obscure X-Men as being your favorite. Like, next, they asked her, how did the opportunity to write X-Force Annual number 1 come about? I was actually reached out to by a fantastic editor, Mark Basso. It was honestly one of the most exciting emails to get in my inbox. When Mark reached out, I didn't even realize I was going to be pitching the actual annual. I thought it was a backup or something. Realizing I was going to get the entire issue to pull off an X-Force mission was super exciting. I really wanted to swing for the fences, and I definitely hit up all my X-Fanatic friends for input. Think about all the amazing comic book writers out there that have never written an X-Men comic, and there's certainly a lot of them. There's been a lot of X-Men comics for a very long time, but there are some absolute killers out there that have never written an X-Men comic. I imagine some of them have pitched them in the past, and there are probably really high-quality X-Men writers that have worked in the past that can't get a response to write an X-Men comic at this moment in time. Yet they're reaching out to Nadia Shammas. Nadia Shammas is the name on the Rolodex. And they said, you know what? We need to write a really badass X-Force comic. Let's go pull out this obscure comic book writer that's never written anything that's ever sold. Let's put her on it. Let's not go out there and find the very best comic book writers, period. Let's not go out there and find the very best X-Men comic writers. Let's not reach out to anybody that would be worth a damn on this comic book, because that wouldn't be virtue signaling enough for Marvel Comics and Mark Basso and all the idiots, the underlings under lead doofus extraordinaire Jordan D. White. The X-Men office is such an enormous shit show under Jordan White. They're actually going out there and cold pitching writers to write stories that they had no intention. They never asked for the opportunity. They never wanted the opportunity. Of course, when you go up to somebody that's like a Nadia Shammas, what are they going to do? Say, no, I would never write an X-Men comic. They're going, holy shit, I got an opportunity I'd never thought I would get because I haven't earned it yet. There are other comic writers that have been paying their dues, waiting their opportunities, and probably have dreamed their entire lives about writing that one X-Men story if they were given the chance. And they're at the back of the line. They're probably not even in the line, if we're being honest, because it wouldn't virtue signal enough. We got to go out there and we got to find somebody that will make us a headline, or that we can say, put in a little photo op and say, this is why you should be reading X-Men. It's not because of the stories. It's not because of the heroes. It's not because of the characters of the history. Look at this. We got a Palestinian American to write an X-Men comic. Absolutely ridiculous. It not only says something about the state of X-Men comics, but says something about the state of Marvel and DC, because this is happening left and right at the other publishers as well. We've heard accounts that Walt Simonson can't get a return on his emails for a story he's pitched to DC. I've heard the same thing about Joe Casey and other fantastic comic book writers, because Nadia Shammas needed to write a fucking X-Force comic that they never asked for the opportunity for anyway. She didn't even have a clue that she was going to be writing the entire comic book. Next, they asked, how do you approach writing licensed characters, especially characters you grew up a fan of, like the X-Men, compared to original creations? This is what Nadia had to say. I think as a comic fan, when you start to develop your own connections to the characters based on what you love about them and the way your favorite creators have handled them, as someone who grew up around fan fiction as well, you learn to zero in on the characteristics you specifically want to work with, the motivations you want to explore most. I definitely always do reading and research into what's been written about the characters before, mostly to nail down their voices, but I really approach IP writing with the care of wanting to work with the themes, characters, ideas I'm most passionate about, while taking great care to maintain the integrity of those characters and what people love about them. If there's one thing we all know about fanfic writers, it's they care about the integrity of the characters. They never put their wants and needs above the history and the actual characteristics of the characters themselves and the worlds that they're in. They would never do this. She goes out there and admits, as someone who grew up around fan fiction, I think we've had enough fanfic writers come into Marvel and DC and do enough destruction at this point that should be an enormous red flag to any editor at Marvel, DC, Image, wherever you are, that this might not be the creator for the project you're working on. And you're damn right she's going to zero in on the characteristics that she's specifically interested in. It's there right there from her own words. Of course, she does caveat at the end, but I'm going to protect the integrity of the character, but I'm only going to write the stuff that I like. It's just really sad to see the state of Marvel and DC, where you have these editorial teams that have so much power. They have so much responsibility, whether you're the X-Men group editor, the Spider-Man group editor, the Avengers group editor, or the Batman group editor, or you're the Superman group editor. And they're just dropping the ball left and right. They're overwhelmed, underpaid, and that's how we get things like this. That's how you get somebody that gets cold pitched, essentially. We want you to write this comic book. And then when they do the first interview, I've always been a huge fan of fan fiction. I grew up around it. Well, I'm sure you did. And there will be nothing that we're expecting out of this other than pure fan fiction and likely the desecration of the characters in the universe, because you don't care about that stuff. And we've seen this enough to know that that's exactly what's going to happen. And then they said, finally, what past work or upcoming work of yours beyond Krakoa do you think X fans should check out? This is what Nadia said. This is my favorite line of the entire interview. Nadia says, well, I'm co-writing a 3-issue arc of Detective Comics with the legendary Mariko Tamaki. I don't want to be a fan of comic books if you have creators out there, writers that are getting paid, that can say with a straight face or with a clear heart and a pure mind that Mariko Tamaki is some type of legendary comic book creator. I just can't take it. Mariko Tamaki is a legend in nobody's mind, not even her own. She got an opportunity on Detective Comics. She wrote a few good issues here and there. During Fear State, her comic books were better than James Tynion, but James Tynion was pretty much out the door and already doing his Substack stuff. The Shadows of the Bat event has been absolutely atrocious. It is unfucking readable. And she started out with an artist like Ivan Rice on the comic to begin with, and it's still awful. For anyone to take Nadia Shammas seriously after saying that she's working with a legendary comic book creator and doesn't follow that up with like Chris fucking Claremont or somebody of that ilk or Jeff Johns or something, maybe a Walt Simonson, but to say Mariko Tamaki is some type of legendary anything is an absolute travesty, and that's the state of comic books that we're in. X-Men will literally hire anybody. They'll hire people that think X3 The Last Stand is a good illustration of what X-Men comics are. They'll hire writers that will go out there and brag about growing up around fan fiction and have somehow gotten to the industry. They'll hire writers that will say with a straight face, with no jest or laughing involved about it, no mocking tone, that Mariko Tamaki is a fucking legendary comic book creator. Think about that. That's the state of Marvel. That's the state of comic books. That's the state of X-Men. That's the state of Batman. It's the state of everything. You wonder why everything is shit for the most part right now? It's statements like that, and it really does leave an impact with you. And it really lets you know that it's probably not the Nadia Shammases of the world that are doing the most damage. It's the Mark Bosses. It's the Jordan Whites. It's the people hiring these fools and destroying these properties and not taking care of them. It will not be the first or last time X-Men group editor Jordan White is proud of something he shouldn't be because it was absolutely awful. You got to watch this video. You got to hear the words of Jordan White, and it really exemplifies everything that's wrong with comic books and how stuff like this, hirings like Nadia Shammas doing an X-Men comic, have come to pass. It's this guy right here and words like this.